Hey everybody, welcome to part 7 in the In Exile video series. For those of you that are new here, I've made a million videos on my Patreon channel, and a few of them have to do with the making of our new album In Exile, the new 1476 album. Kind of documents the whole process leading up, like what we were thinking musically, what we were thinking lyrically, what the imagery means, the recording process, all of that stuff. I documented in 6 other videos, and it's been a while since I made one. And now that the first single is released and that we have a release date announced and pre-orders are available, and I'll put links to everything below, both on Patreon and on YouTube, links to pre-order the album, links to watch the video, listen to the single called When Comes the Dawn, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So we released a lyric video or visualizer for this song, and as the next part of the In Exile music video series, I'm going to talk about all the singles. So now that this track is out in public, I want to deep dive this song. We're going to talk about this song in as much detail as I can, and from our intentions, the musical angle, the lyrical angle, whatever information that may pertain to the song that may possibly be interesting to you that I can think of, we'll get into it. And as the next 2 singles come out, I'll make videos for those as well. The next one is coming out on May 16th, I believe. And the other one may be June 21st, if I remember. And then the album comes out July 7th. And I'll make videos for all of those. So for those of you that don't know, that have never watched any of the videos on this Patreon page, one thing that I do is I'll go through every album that I've ever made or have been a part of and really break it down and just talk about every aspect of it that I can, and explain the intention behind the album, the lyrics, the theme, the music itself, the recording process, everything that was going on with us personally at the time. So I did that for all of our previous releases, for Poe, Our Season Draws Near, for Wildwood, Smoke in the Sky. I even did one for our, extinct, aborted first album, The Wolf's Age. I made a big video about that as well for those that are interested. Those are all on the Patreon page, so there's a link below if you're interested in joining that. So I will do the same for In Exile. Once the album is released, I'll do a full deep dive of this video, but of this album, I mean. But so much of it has already been talked about in the previous 6 videos, so check those out if you wish. But today we're going to be talking about When Comes the Dawn. It's the first single. The title of the album is a question, and with each album we make, and I think I talked about this possibly in the album, one of the album concept videos for In Exile, or maybe in the lyric video I made about lyrics. But one thing that is important to me with each 1476 album, I kind of want to find a new vocabulary, a new language, like a new way to approach lyrics. So I'm not just writing about the same stuff in the same way over and over on each album. So the easy example of that is with Our Season Draws Near. That was an album that was largely about isolation and alienation and resignation. And one thing that I thought was funny is I was talking to one of my friends who owns a record store the other day, and he was saying, oh man, I can't wait to hear In Exile and see the whole album, because it's very colorful, and the songs are colorful, because he's heard the whole album already. But he's like, the songs have way more color to them, and the imagery is more colorful. And, he's like, it's a whole new thing, like a new different place where, he's like, Our Season Draws Near is just like moody and dark. And he's like, because you live in this fucking miserable place. And I never thought of it that way, but Our Season Draws Near is very wrapped up in where we live, and I never thought about it the way he said it, but he's right. So the album is very much about this kind of miserable place that we live, or sometimes it's miserable. Anyways, it's all subjective, but yeah. So it is very much about that, and alienation and isolation, and the language on that album, the lens through which we look through to write the lyrics and put the imagery together was winter imagery particularly, and like Norse mythology. And that was sort of the vocabulary of the album, where Wildwood was more ceremonial magic and animal themes and nature themes and things like that, and it had a whole different concepts. So tried to find a new way of talking about things for In Exile, and one thing I wanted to do is have to be more inquisitive, to ask questions. And there are a bunch of other things too, but I'm going to get into those for the videos for the next singles, because I think all the singles each showcase one of the different elements I wanted to do, and one of them was to ask questions. Another one was to use prepositional phrases, which I don't know why. It was just, I liked the way it sounded. Like there's a track called Beyond the Meadows, Beyond the Moors, so there's just things like that. And then there are these other songs that are named after different stones, followed by fire. So the third single is going to be called Jade Fire, a Paragon. So there's a bunch of fire songs on the album, or if they're not in the title, they're in the lyrics. So same with the questions. So some of the songs have questions for titles, and not every song, but almost every single song has a question within the lyrics that's being asked. The ones that don't have question, I just didn't force them in. I didn't want to do it just to do it. I wanted it to be sincere, and the songs just didn't go that way. But I think it's only 2 songs, and we recorded 16 songs, so that's pretty good. And all 16 songs can be found in the special art book edition of the album. So, speaking of that, this song in particular was intended to be the first song of the album. When I wrote all this music, we originally intended In Exile to be a 2 CD double album. And it didn't really work out that way, because the way I had the album laid out, I just didn't like the way it flowed with the songs together on 2 discs like that. So we cut it down to 1 disc that flowed in a way that really felt good, and put the songs that are not on the album on the bonus discs, because we're still really happy with the songs. It's just putting them all together, spread over 2 discs, wasn't, it didn't feel the way I was hoping it would. I think it was like overkill, and it was just a smarter idea to make it just a single album. So that's what we did. But when we first did that, this song was intended to be the album opening because of the theme of the lyrics and the theme of the album overall. This sat well at the beginning of the album. It was the gateway into In Exile. And as a side note, what's funny about that is this was supposed to be the first song on the first disc, and then the last song on the first disc ended up being what we made the first song of the album. So the last song became the first song, and now this song is in the middle of the album because it just sonically, it fits good in the middle of the album. It sounds better with the other songs surrounding it. So now conceptually, because this was supposed to be the introduction to the album, and just for those who don't know, because for some of you this will probably be your first time hearing this, what this album is about in a way is each song is its own worlds. And I kind of thought of like people that I look up to. Some of them are real people, some of them are fictitious characters, and like, what if they were mythological characters that lived in their own realm. Like, what would that realm look like? What would their attributes be? So like if you take like mythology, if you know, like Zeus is like a thunder god and he's the leader of the gods, and like Aphrodite is a goddess of love, things like that. What would these people that I admire, that I feel an affinity with, what would their attributes be? And so I just started writing down a bunch of names and then coming up with attributes. And I didn't have much hope for it because I thought they'd kind of all be the same. And I was shocked to find when I started writing down little keywords for each person, how like distinct each one was. And each one really inhabited their own kind of feeling and philosophy and identity. And then I basically did like meditations to kind of let this person guide me through their realm before I wrote the lyrics, so I can kind of go into that world and kind of just record what I see. So it's almost like a Dante's Inferno thing, just being guided through hell in a sense. But my worlds weren't hell. They were all different. Some of them were hell and some of them were beautiful and idyllic. And that's what I really wanted In Exile to be, was to present this song called When Comes the Dawn, which sort of presents the situation where we're living in a world right now that's really in upheaval and strife and darkness. And this sort of presents that. And how do we where are some other places we can go to get out of there or solve that problem or make it better or make it worse, you know? And it just depends on who my guide was. And there's no real answer. The answer is going to be different for everybody. So there are some songs on the album that I feel like this is for me, this is where I would want to go. And there are other ones that I actually completely disagree with the sentiment of the song. But I had to honor that, be true to that idea, and follow it through to the end and record it, because that's what was given to me. That's what was presented to me. So that's how we did it. And we just stayed loyal to those ideas, even if it was something that we personally don't agree with. And I would say the opening track on the album is a sentiment that I don't agree with. But there has to be, I still had to write it. So I did find myself in those songs still. Like, there were still things I could relate to and identify with, even if I don't agree with them. I think myself 20 years ago, for example, would be more in line with the opening track of the album, which is called Lost in Exile. I would be more in line with that 20 years ago than I am today. So I still know that person. I still can identify with that, even though I don't agree with it. So that's just like a short example of like what we're getting into with this album. And so because this song was intended to sort of be the gateway into the album, one thing I'm not going to do is talk about who these people are in each song that I look up to or whatever, because I think it'll kind of take some of the magic out of the album. But for this one, I will give some examples of that. And one is actually a fictional character that's kind of based on a Russian myth character called Medved in this book called The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. Highly recommend this book. It's the first book in a trilogy called the Winter Night Trilogy. It's a great like medieval Russian fantasy novel. It's fantasy, not like the Lord of the Rings. It's fantasy in the way that like a Neil Gaiman book is fantastical, but it's a great story wrapped up in Russian mythology and medieval Russia. And I just was absolutely in love. But there's a character called Medved, or the bear. And he just represents absolute chaos and like murder and destruction and death. And that's one thing that I really wanted to capture in this song. There's a scene in the TV show Twin Peaks. I think it might be the 6th episode of season 1. But either way, I'll put a link to a clip of what I'm talking about below so you can see it. But there's a scene that actually like kind of frightens me when I watch it, where you see a girl is dreaming about the murder of like kind of the main character of the show, and the way it's filmed and the way they show it is just so cold and vicious and horrifying and brutal and heartless, just vulgar in a way. And that's really what I wanted to capture in this song. And once again, it's like, even though I'm not that type of person, I'm not really like an aggressive person or a murderous person, obviously, there is something to identify with there. There is something like, as people, we tend to like feed off of death and devastation and destruction. We're fucking ghouls in that way, like where we will feel an almost lust when we see violence or things like that. And you know, I feel like we do a good job of channeling it in a healthy way through like film or art, or even playing video games maybe, or even like watching things like mixed martial arts or UFC, like where you just get like, you feel like this excitement and like almost this lust towards the violence or whatever. So that's one thing I really wanted to capture in this song. And I went as far as I could with it without it being like tacky. And it was important to me because I wanted to go even further than I did. I wanted it to be even more brutal and more ugly and vicious and cold and violent than the song is. But I personally couldn't do that without making it like campy or tacky. So I pushed it to the line as far as I personally could. But before I could write the lyrics to this, because I had trouble, I just did some like free writing of what I wanted to be this song about, and I didn't really think about it. And I just wrote everything down so I could just get a bunch of feelings out before I actually sat down to write the lyrics. And I want to read, it's just one page, but I want to read it to you. So, because I do think this still sums up the song better than the song itself in a way. This sums up the intention of the song better than I can anywhere else. And it kind of sets up the album. So keep in mind, when I wrote this was intended to be the first song on the album. But I think this does a good job at explaining kind of what the album's intention is and where it's about. So I'll just read it. It says, "When Comes the Dawn holds its answers in the title and the dream sequence." So before I go on, the dream sequence in the song is the small acoustic section in the middle with the quiet vocals, where it says, "With our king in exile, our grail is lost, and until it's found, life and land will dream beneath the frost." So the answers to the song are held within the dream sequence. It says, "We're in a world of total destruction, death, violence, murder with abandon, the hunger for these things, the feeding off of chaos. In the end, it's the serpent devouring its own tail, devouring its entire self eventually. It's catastrophic due to the self-awareness of what's being done and laughingly embracing it, even with this knowledge." So it's knowing that you're doing awful, evil, dark, destructive things and doing it in a smug way. You know what you're doing and you're embracing that. And that's what this song is. Anyways, it goes on. "It is Medved," which is the character from the book I just showed you. "It is Killer Bob from Twin Peaks. We are escorted through this landscape by Bob, or the bear, Medved, and we see what he sees. But the title asks us, when does this end? When comes the dawn? Where does this stop? And the dream sequence is the gateway out of this world. It's subtle and hidden in the ivy, but it is there for us to pass through if we don't miss it. And from there, with each song, we have a new guide showing us their realms. In these other realms, we may find our holy grail, or they may end up being dead-end roads. A door opens to a wall of bricks. The answer may be in the middle somewhere, or wherever you wish to see it. It's not a linear journey. Choose your own adventure. So that's what In Exile is, ultimately, and that's philosophically, I guess, thematically, that's what this song is. So yeah, I went as far as I could without making it lame, I guess. And I hope you all enjoy it. But that's what it's about. And I made a playlist for this song on Spotify, which I'll also link below, that goes into some of the inspirations behind this song, like some direct musical inspirations, but it also goes into songs that share similar sentiments lyrically, and then there are just some that share similar feelings musically that I just thought fit well, like with the vibe of the music. And I tried to keep it as versatile as possible. So there's everything from some folk songs to like straight up black metal songs, some punk stuff, some classic heavy rock is in there. Like there's an Ozzy Osbourne song in there. There's some Bathory in there. Satyricon. The Satyricon song in the playlist is one I wanted the studio version of, but I couldn't get it on Spotify for some reason, so I had to put a live version. But that song's a great example where there is some musical overlap in the outro of our song and the outro of their song. I feel like there's some similar vibes there, but lyrically, there's definitely some connection there. So that's that. I'll put that in the link below for you. So now, I guess kind of the last thing I'd like to talk about regarding this song is, well, I guess just a quick, no, I'll tell you that after. I want to talk about the music itself. So there are some parts of this song musically that were written during Our Season Draws Near, and I couldn't fit them into any of the songs. It felt like it just didn't work. I needed a whole fresh new concept to take these musical ideas and develop them. Like I just kept hitting dead ends with Our Season Draws Near with these pieces. So I will show you which pieces I mean. So there is the quiet part in the middle that I referenced earlier, the dream sequence, So that I wrote for Our Season Draws Near, and it just didn't fit with any of the songs. And then the part before that with the blast beat, that part, and then has the lead over at the that whole thing. All of that I wrote for Our Season Draws Near, but couldn't fit it in. I think that heavy part, I actually wanted it to be part of Odessa, and clearly it just, like, it became too much and it just didn't fit in. And then also for Our Season Draws Near, if you have the art book version of that album, you'll know that there's an unreleased song called Winter of the Sword that I wrote lyrics for, because they were supposed to be Winter of Winds, Winter of the Sword, and Winter of Wolves. But I got the lyrics for Sword, but I couldn't nail the music down. I recorded 2 completely different versions of the song, and some of that music was a part of that, and it just didn't work. So thankfully, when it came time to write In Exile, I was able to approach it with a clean slate, completely new set of imagery, and completely different outlook and mentality on things. And when it really came together is when I wrote the introduction. So I still had these parts and I knew I wanted to do something with them. But when I came up with that whole thing, I wrote on an acoustic guitar fingerpicked, so that's why it's like weird right now. But yeah, but you know. So once I wrote that part, the whole song opened up and I was able to connect all those pieces together and then put in the rest of the music. So musically, that's basically it. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like I wanted to say one other thing, but I completely forgot. But I'm just seeing that notebook that I was reading off of down there, and I wrote a quote at the top, but I didn't write who said it for some reason, which is unlike me, so I don't even know who said it. But it says, to be an artist means you can never turn your eyes away. And I think that's largely what this song is about and what In Exile is about. So I think that's basically it. And when I was doing that lead, when I originally wrote that, I only wanted it to just be those two notes. And the chords underneath change, and I just wanted to do that same thing over and over again. But, you know, as it developed, I added other notes in, and I think it's probably better for it that way. But I liked the idea of just having one thing that repeats with the chords changing underneath it instead of the opposite, which is kind of usually how things work musically. Another thing musically is that kind of getting into the theme of the song, where I felt like I wanted it to go further and further and just make it darker and darker and more aggressive, but I couldn't do that lyrically without making it lame. I wanted the music to go further too. I wanted it to be really nasty and gritty and noisy sounding and just chaotic and brutal. And I just remember like telling Neil, like, no, like just go like use the crash cymbal the whole, so don't even use the hi-hats. They're too like pretty and quiet. Just slam the crash the whole time and make it noisy. And he like kind of was like, are you sure about this? And I'm like, yeah. And so we basically got there, but I really wanted it nastier and noisier. But that led me to thinking there's a lot of things musically that I want to do that are a lot more chaotic sounding and like uglier. And I don't think 1476 is really the vehicle for that. And I don't think the rest of the band would even be interested in doing anything like that. So I think I'm going to be starting a new project to kind of express those things as well, but we'll see. So aside from that, I guess the last thing I want to say is we have 2 more singles coming out before the album's released, and there'll be videos for both of those. So this first video for When Comes the Dawn is very simple, with just some of the album imagery presented in a different way, just like a little lyric video visualizer. Our next single, which is called Where Kings Fall, that one is the complete opposite of this song. I think the lyrics in that song may actually be even more dark and vicious than this one, but we'll get into that in a future video. But the music is the opposite. It's essentially like a laid back, like folk song. So that'll be presenting to you like kind of the different spectrums of the album, where this is one of the heavier, more aggressive songs. This is probably the polar opposite of it with this next single. And there actually are even quieter and more folky songs than that one. And there are actually songs that are heavier than this one on the album as well, or at least moments. So these aren't the total opposite extremes, but they're just examples of that. But the next video will be a lyric video as well, but it's closer to more like a real music video than this one is. And then the third single for Jade Fire is actual like full out music video. The first one we've ever made, that we made ourselves. We shot it on film actually, so it's not digital, it's shot on film on a Super 8 camera. And we just, like we do all of our shit, we DIY'd it, we did everything ourselves, and I'm just editing that now, and the footage came out really cool. And yeah, so that's it. So I hope you've been enjoying everything. There's links below to pre-order In Exile. Thank you for all your kindness and support so far, and especially the people on Patreon who essentially funded this whole project. So thank you so much for that. If you like this video, there's over 100 more videos, I think, at this point, of stuff in this realm on the Patreon page. For like $5 a month, you basically get all the content, unreleased music on the first of every month, tons of stuff, tour journals with 1476. I think there's about 40 entries in that right now. So yeah, if you're interested, there's that. So thank you very much. And if not, that's cool too. But links to everything below, and thank you. And to my Patreon supporters, I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you.